So as we begin our look into topic 5 and looking at how we can divide whole numbers, the first lesson that we're going to look at today is using patterns and mental math to divide. So you're going to be able to find quotients of numbers by using patterns. So we're really going to be looking at those patterns with the multiples of 10. So first thing I want to talk about before we jump into that is I want to make sure that you understand the 3 parts of a division problem. So if I have this value, so let's say I have 363 and I'm dividing that by 13. And when I divide that by 13, let's say that my answer is 27. Now, I don't know that the answer is 27. That's the part that's not important. What's important is that you can identify the 3 parts of the division problem. So this right here, the number that is before your division symbol, this is what we call the dividend. Okay, so the job of the dividend is the number that's being divided. The 13 is what we call the divisor. It's the number that's doing the dividing. And then this last number, this 27, that's going to be our quotient, or going to be our answer. So we're going to be working on this within the next 2 topics, really making sure that you understand what a dividend is, what a divisor is, and then what the quotient is. So when I say that we can find quotients of numbers by using patterns, we're really looking for answers when we divide 2 numbers using those patterns. So if I take a look at the first problem, I'm going to be on page 240, and it says a jet carries 18,000 passengers in 90 trips. Okay, the plane is full for each trip. So how many passengers does the plane hold? So I'm taking 18,000 and I'm saying I have 90 trips that happen. I want to know how many passengers were on each trip. So to find that, I'm going to divide this value by 90. Now, when we look at this, we have patterns of 10. So these are our multiples of 10 here. So what I can do is I can use what I call the multiple of 10 rule to manipulate those zeros. So I can take zeros away when I'm dividing, and if I need to, I can add them back on. When we did multiplication, we did a lot of taking zeros from one side and moving them to the product. Here, that's not necessarily going to be the case. We're not necessarily going to be taking zeros and moving them. We're just going to be eliminating zeros and then dividing. So if I do 18,000 divided by 90, the first thing I'm going to take a look at is I'm going to look at my number fact. So my number fact that I have, if I just take away all the zeros, is I have 18 divided by 9, which is equal to 2. So if I then start looking at multiples tens and I said, well, what if I made this 180 and I divided that by 90? That's still going to be equal to 2. But then let's say I'm now going to leave the 90 alone because I'm now at the point where my divisor is the same. If I have 1,800 divided by 90, my answer is going to be 20. Now, the reason my answer is going to be 20 is because I added on this 0 here. And then if I did 18,000 and I divided that by 90, my answer is going to be 200. So my answer here is going to be 200 because I used my patterns. But I'm going to show you guys another way that's going to be a little bit faster to help you guys think about your answer. So here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take off the 0 in the 90. Now, my multiple of 10 rule, when I manipulate this 0, when I take this 0 away, I have to do the same thing to my dividend. So I'm going to take this 0 away. So now I have 18 and then 2 zeros divided by 9. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do 18 divided by 9, which is going to be 2. And then I'm going to, these zeros that I have left, I'm going to add them over here on the end. So my answer is going to be 200. So I am able to manipulate and move those zeros first by getting rid of zeros. So I got rid of the number of zeros I had in my divisor. I took them off in my dividend. And then I took the 2 zeros that I had left and I moved them over to my quotient. And then I just did 18 divided by 9 to get to 2. Okay, so let's try another one. So if we look at this, if the jet carried, so I'm going to convince me, if the jet above carried 10,000 people in 50 trips, how many people did it carry each trip? The people carried the same number, or the jet carried the same number of people each trip. That tells me that it's going to be a division problem because I'm dividing 10,000 over 50 and it's the same amount. So I'm going to do the same thing where I look at this and see if I can use that multiple of 10 rule to help me find my answer. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take away this 0 here. Now, when I take away this 0 here, I have to do the same thing to the 10,000. So now I'm going to leave the 10 alone because the fact that I'm going to be looking at is going to be 10 divided by 5. So I'm not going to take this 0 and put it over here. But these two zeros, I don't have anything I'm going to do with them with. I'm not going to mess with them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move them over to my divisor or to my quotient. And when I move them over to my answer, that's just going to make it to where it's an easy problem to where I'm just doing 10 divided by 5. And so I'm going to put my two zeros there. And then I'm left with 10 divided by 5, which is equal to 2. So my answer there is going to be equal to 200. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the 0 off of my divisor. And however many zeros I take off on my divisor, that's how many zeros I'm taking off on my dividend. I take the remaining zeros and I move them over to my quotient. And then I'm left with my basic math fact of 10 divided by 5. I find that answer and I put it in front of the zeros to get an answer of 200. Okay, go ahead and go to your guided practice. So it says, why is 210 divided by 30 the same as 21 tens divided by 3 tens? Okay, so when I think of 210 and I'm dividing that by 30, if I take the zeros off, right, these are place values for the ones place value. And so if I look at this, I really do have 21 tens and I have 30 tens because, or 3 tens, because that 0 is my placeholder for the ones that tells me that I have 3 tens. Because the value I have here in my tens place value is 3. And here I have 21 tens because those two values come before the 0. Okay, so I can think of this, if I look at it a different way, I can think of this as 21 times 10 divided by 3 times 10. And that's how I can get my answer to be 210 divided by 30 is the same as 21 tens divided by 3 tens. Okay, number 2. A jet carried 12,000 people in 40 trips. If the jet was full each trip, how many people did it carry for each trip? So I have 12,000 people, and I carried the same amount of people for 40 trips. So that right there, that's my division problem. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 12,000 and I'm going to divide it by 40. So when I do 12,000 divided by 40, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of those zeros. So I have a 0 in the 40, so that's going to come off. So if I take a 0 off in the 40, that means I have to take one of the zeros off in the 12,000. Then I take these two zeros that are left and I bring them over to my quotient. Now they're done. I don't have anything left with the zeros. I now have 12 divided by 4, and 12 divided by 4 is going to be 3. So on each trip, I took 300 people. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do in 3 through 7 on your guys' guided practice is we're going to go through and we're going to use those patterns of 10 and use that multiple of 10 rule to help us find the answers. So the first one that I have is I have 210 divided by 30, and that's going to equal 21 tens divided by 3 tens. So if you'll notice, the zeros have already been taken off here. When I take off those zeros, that's already here. So I'm left with 21 divided by 3. So my answer is going to be 7. Okay. Next one that I have is I have 480 tens, or 480 divided by 60. And if I think about those in terms of tens, I'm left with 48 tens divided by 6 tens. So again, when I put them in the word form of tens, what I'm doing is I'm really taking off those zeros. And then I'm left with 48 divided by 6, which is going to be equal to 8. Okay. Problem that we're going to look at is I'm going to look at 15,000 divided by 30. And again, if I write that in terms of 10 forms, I'm going to, if I go to my tens place value, it's going to be 150 tens. I'm sorry, 1,500 tens divided by 3 tens. So again, I took off those zeros. So there 0 went, that 0 went, and I'm left with these 2 zeros. So I can go ahead and I can put those over there on the quotients. Now, really, I'm left with 15 divided by 3, which is going to be 500. Okay. Next one that I have is I have 8,100 divided by 90. So I'm not thinking about these necessarily in terms of tens anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 0 here with my 90, and I'm going to cross it out. And again, when I cross the 0 out in the 90, I have to do the same thing in the dividend. So I have to take a 0 out over here. Now I take this 0 that's left, and I put it over in my quotient, and then I can cross it out. Now I'm left with 81 divided by 9. Well, that's a simple math fact. So 81 divided by 9 is going to be 9. So my answer is going to be 90. Okay, so if I have 2,800 and I'm dividing that by 70, when I divide that by 70, again, I'm going to take that 0 off on the 70, which means I have to take a 0 off on the 2,800. The 0 that's left, I'm going to put it over on my quotient, cross it off, and I'm left with 28 divided by 7, which is 4. So my answer of 2,800 divided by 70 is going to be 40. Take a look at the next one that we have. We have 30,000, and I'm going to divide that by 50.
Staff.
Divided by 50. And so again, I'm going to take the 0 off of the 5. Or off of the 50, and if I take it off 1 0 off the 50, I have to take 1 0 off of the 30,000. Now, here's where it gets tricky, because I have to take a look. If I take all zeros away, so let's say I take away, so I'm going to write this down below. So I'm left with 3 zeros, and if I take all zeros away, okay, and I say, okay, so I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to put them over here. 1, 2, 3. I'm left with 3 divided by 5. That's not a math fact that I have learned how to do yet, and it's not going to give me a whole number answer. So when you notice that this happens, you're going to have to put that 0 back. So the only 2 zeros I can take out are going to be these 2, because then it leaves me with 30 divided by 5. So I'm going to put these 2 zeros here, cross them out. 30 divided by 5 is going to be 6 for 600. Okay. The last problem I'm going to take a look at is I have 1,800 divided by 60. And so again, when I do this, I'm going to take the 0 off of my 6. And when I take the 0 off of my 6, I'm then going to take these 2 values, and I'm going to take one of the zeros off. I'm left with 1 0, so I move that over to my quotient and cross it off here. And then I'm left with 18 divided by 6, and 18 divided by 6 is going to be 30. So I can use this strategy of taking away zeros, and by crossing them off, I actually get to see that. I mentally see me moving those, physically see me moving those zeros over. So use that strategy to help you guys with that, using those patterns and those multiples of 10. You need to do both sides of your practice, the independent practice, all values on the front, and then you're working all of the math practice and problem solving on the back side.